Hi everyone, this video we're going to cover policies and procedures. There's no, it's only mentioned in the study design. There's nothing sort of specifically that you have to know about policies and procedures. So what we're going to cover in this video is what a policy is, what a procedure is, and a policy development process, and pretty much how they fit into an organisation. So policy is a set of broad guidelines that are followed for an employee. So a lot of, just one example, there's lots of different policies. Your school will have lots of different policies, and it's the same with any organisation. An example there, since emails come out, a lot of people receive lots of emails, and sometimes it's hard to determine the context of an email. So a lot of organisations now have an email policy where you can't send emails. I know some organisations say you can't send emails after 9 o'clock at night. So Google has tried that policy before. There might be policies that you can't send emails when you're disgruntled with an employee. You can't send it to all staff. You can't sell your car through email at work. Those kind of things. So they're just a set of broad guidelines that need to be followed. Policies are often created by top management, and they're often created because of problems that are occurring or foreseeable problems. But it's important that often employees play a vital role in the creation of the policies, because they're the ones that are actually are going to have to carry out that particular policy. Now, a procedure is a practical way or a set of steps that is going to help the employees put a policy into practice. So, if for the email policy example, as I said, there could be that you can't sell your car on to all staff. You can't send it to all staff and say, I've got a car for sale. Now, if that's breached, what actually happens? What's the process that happens to put that into practice, to actually carry out that policy? So procedure, set of steps, policy, broad guidelines. Policies and procedures, essentially, they're there to help large organisations achieve their objectives. Everything they do is trying to help them achieve their objectives. It's important that policies are reviewed regularly because things change. Laws change, the way the business operates, that changes. So it's important that a policy is developed. Once it's developed, it's reviewed and often changed and continually monitored. Now, in order to carry out a policy or develop a policy, we use what is called a policy development process. Now, the word process, if you ever see that in a question, especially in an exam, that means a set of steps. So when you go through planning, or if you've already gone through planning, you will have heard of a planning process. That's a set of 5 or so steps. It's the same with a policy. It's going through a set of steps. So if a question asks, explain how, or go through a policy development process, or explain how an organisation or a manager would develop a policy, that's where you go through a set of steps. So this is it. Now, this is not specifically in the study design, so these steps aren't in there. So in your textbook, you may have a different policy development process. Your teacher may teach you a different policy development process. It's not set in stone, but this is the one that we use. Some textbooks have 9. It doesn't say how many steps in the study design a policy process needs, but I think it's important to have at least 6. So here we go. First of all, they need to identify the issue. So what is the actual problem that the policy is going to try and overcome? Conduct some research. That could be internally and also externally, that you actually conduct research. You might search other organisations that have a similar policy, or they have a particular issue that you have, and how have they overcome that. You then need to consult the stakeholders. So who is this policy actually going to affect? The people that have a vested interest in that policy, you need to consult with them and see what they think. Then the policy is developed. Once it's developed, it has to be approved, and you need to communicate that. So all the employees that are going to be affected by the policy need to carry it out, they know exactly what's expected of them. And then, as I said earlier, it needs to be reviewed regularly. So we use the acronym IRCDAR. You can put any words to that you want, but essentially identify, research, consult, develop, approve. It's important to approve and communicate, though. You can't just approve it and then just expect everyone knows what's going on. So it's approve and communicate and then review. So let's go through an example. Now this is just a made up example. This isn't fact, but this isn't exactly how they did it, but this is just an example to hopefully show you how someone would go through this policy development process. So let's say the AFL Drugs Policy, their illicit drugs policy or any kind of drugs policy. First of all, they need to identify the issue or the problem. So, there's a problem that they haven't got they don't have a policy in place, and that what happens if they're caught taking illicit drugs, or if they're caught taking performance enhancing drugs. So Andrew Demetriou is obviously the CEO of the AFL, so he needs to identify that issue. Then we go through research, so conduct research and actually find out what other organisations have done. So they might go to the Australian Drug Foundation and find out, all right, how do we help if our athletes are taking illicit drugs? How do we help them? What's the best process and practice to go through? They may look externally as well to other organisations, other football organisations, and see what their policies are. But they need to conduct research so that they can make wise decisions and informed decisions. Then need to consult stakeholders. So that may be the AFL clubs. They obviously wouldn't just consult with 3, they'd consult with all of them, but they're the ones I could fit on the screen. So to see what they would need, what they want to know, the information they want to know, and what they think about the particular policy. Might be sports doctors, consult with them. So it might be the doctors of the clubs. It might also be sports doctors that don't have anything to do with the clubs. And probably it would be important to, because it's affecting the players, you'd have to be looking at the AFL Players Association. And there's probably many other stakeholders that they would use, but they're just some examples of ones that they would consult with to get information from. Then they develop the policy. So now he wouldn't write it himself, he would have input, and there would be people that would start writing up that particular policy. Once it's been approved, it would be sent out. A memo would be sent out. Often the AFL does it by DVD, and they show DVDs and memos and say that this is the actual policy. They give them a copy. This is how it works. These are the steps that and the procedure that, if it's breached, that how the steps that actually need to be undertaken. Then it needs to be reviewed, constantly reviewed. So is it working? Does it need some changes? Has it actually been effective? If not, then we may need to make some changes. If so, then we may still make some tweaks to improve it. But it needs to constantly be reviewed so that it can stay up to date and continue to improve. So that is how, in a simple way, how a policy would be developed. So just to recap, first of all, identify the issue, research, consult stakeholders, develop the policy, approve and communicate the policy, and then constantly review the policy. And as I said earlier, you can come up with your own policy process, use what works best for you, and talk to your teacher, look at your textbook and see what policy process they have, because it's not set in stone what policy process you have to know, but you just need to know about policies and procedures. And just remember, for more videos, activities, questions, and a lot more, go to teachingbubble.com.